see you all here this Sankofa Video Bookstore and Cafe, which we hope soon to be calling Sankofa Film Institute. Yes. Because we're trying our best to do some more wonderful things. And, you know, for real, one of the reasons that I'm standing here right now in whatever we're calling what we do now is because of people like Sylvia. You know, when I came to D.C. in 1975, I was basically a student and, you know, dissatisfied with a lot of things. And Sylvia was around, she may not know, as a mentor, because I joined the June 16th Coalition, which was there in order to fight for Southern African liberation. And as you know, June 16th was the date of a horrible massacre in Soweto. So a lot of us who were just like looking for a way to fight back came together and formed the June 16th Coalition. So I joined that, and a number of people who are in the room now were a part of that effort, because Southern Africa was not an acceptable situation for black people in the diaspora. Anybody who said we were fighting for rights here knew that fighting for rights in Southern Africa was mandatory. So this day is a look at 50 years later. Everybody in this room looks so young and alive. It's hard to believe that 50 years have passed. But the work that was done then has definitely spawned other work in other areas, if not Southern Africa, many, many other areas. So that's also one thing that I learned from people like Sylvia Hill, Dr. Hill, because one thing that she says in a film that we did called Wilmington 10, USA 10,000, was she was saying, like, you start here, you organize here, and then that leads to something else having to happen over here. So you choose where your battles are going to be. And in choosing those battles, you change people in that battle. Even if you lose that battle, you change people, and then they go on to do more things. So that was a wonderful lesson for young people like me. So thank you, Sylvia. Trying our best. And I'm not introducing the group today. I'm going to leave that to someone else who's more capable than I. But I did want to say before I hand over the mic that we want you to come back, because we keep on having things that we think you'll be interested in. Tomorrow, for example, we're trying to... We'll have another section or presentation on activist archiving. So we've been here for a few minutes, and we've collected and created enough material that we think will benefit generations to come. And so we think that it's also our responsibility to create an archive to protect it and conserve it, and then digitize it and pass it on. So this is outside. These are we have the films that we produced, but then you also have the archive of the other materials that didn't make it into a film. And so that archivist activists event is a third in a series that's got two or three more series, and it's featuring Haile Gerima and Nahir Tafara, who will be talking about the colonial archive world that we live in. That if you want to have access to your own images that may have even been created during colonialism or during a neocolonialist era, what are your rights for those images? So it's not just talking about pieces of art that were stolen, but it's also talking about the images that they took of us while they're, while we're fighting back, and then not giving you access to them. So there's that kind of conversation going on tomorrow. And I've been told also to say something about Dr. Carr. Dr. Carr is also on September 12th. Howard students are being welcomed. We're welcoming them back from vacation. The whole building will be taken up with events. There'll be a book discussion on unburying our dead, with song by Mukuma wa Ngugi, who is the son of our wonderful author Ngugi. and he will be having a rich conversation on Tizita music from Ethiopia, in addition, featuring a rich conversation on Tizita, which is a classic from Ethiopian musical traditions, with Professor Carol Boyce Davies, also from Howard University. I'm sure you all know something about her writing and contribution to the intellectual discussion on so many things. So we hope that we've been told to say we're having an African Diaspora Literature's Chair series at Sankofa. So please go to sankofa.com if you're not already signed up for the newsletter, and don't miss it. And I'd like to introduce my brother Mwizi Muthanli.
Thank you very much, Shirkiana. We started this series, Soweto at 50, looking at the legacy of Soweto a month ago on June 20th when we showed the film Uprising, which looked at the actual Soweto Uprising of 1976. And we felt that it was important to not just to talk about the uprising, but also hopefully to contextualize it in what's happening today's youth in not just South Africa, but continent-wide. So we're going to have it'll be a series. We thought we couldn't do it all at one time. And so that's why we had the film. And then today we have part 2 of that ongoing discussion, looking at the Soweto Uprising and its impact on South Africa especially, but also the continent and the wider African diaspora as well. Then we're delighted today working with Sankofa. I'm with Africa World Now Project, co-sponsoring this event with Sankofa. And I just want to introduce on our panel today, we're delighted to have people who have been really pioneers in the movement, and I like to live up to their legacy. Some of them have been my boss. Actually, Sylvia Hill, for full disclosure, was my boss and was on the board of when I worked at Trans-Africa. And so Sylvia Hill was a Pan-Africanist, helped organize the 1974 Pan-Africanist Congress in Dar es Salaam as well. So I was also a board member of Trans-Africa, even chair of Trans-Africa Forum at one time. Was it chair? No, you weren't chair, but you always think you were chair. But you did the chair work. And has been involved in also in the movement here as well. And I think you're here for this. And in 1976, when the uprising occurred, he was expelled from school as a teacher. And then he went into exile in 1978. And I think he can address that more. But it was a lot of us who are here in Washington know him, worked with him when he was in exile, and was able to, was one of the people who made sure that we knew exactly what was happening in South Africa. And it was people like Twiggs, who was online, and when he went back, he continued the struggle. He's still involved in various activities, which he can let us know about. And so we're delighted to have him on Zoom. Sorry for the, we had a little snag at the beginning, that's why we returned. It took a while to connect with him, but not so much on his part, actually, the problem was here. He was already connected. And also, of course, with us is Dr. Carr at Howard University in Africana Studies, and Dr. Carr has written extensively, lectured extensively, and then about to go to the motherland in a couple of weeks, right? It's Saturday, so he's going on Saturday for the 2-week journey with students from Howard University, and so he's with us today. If you can give all of us a hand, please. I'm going to have Dr. Carr begin the conversation so that he can put it in some context of looking at the history, and then hopefully we can get to Twiggs as well, and then Dr. Hill. Yeah, Twiggs, you can hear us, right? Although it says
okay.
Yeah, okay, but can you see? We just see a silhouette of you. If you have the camera.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was blocking his view. But can you see? I think we'd like to get your picture, Twiggs. Are you able to switch on your camera? Oh, there you go. Thanks. There's Twiggs. So in the audience, of course, is Mark Harrison, who's another long-time veteran of the movement, a friend of Twiggs. But I wanted Dr. Carr, if you could kind of briefly set this scenario.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Muiza. Muiza Mutali, African Now Collective. Let's have a round of applause for him because he really, thank you. The Uprise film, which was the first in the three, there'll be another program after this, another conversation. We'll kind of round this out. We thought that it was important in this semi-quincentennial celebration of the criminal enterprise known as United States of America to not forget the other criminal enterprise of the Union of South Africa. And bring it in. So I'm going to be very brief because you are here, Dr. Hill, Baba Twiggs, because you all are here, all of your freedom-fighting friends have decided to come into the room. So I think we could probably all agree that the best use of our brief time together today is to listen to you all and to listen in the context of this room. So I'm hoping that we will wear these microphones out with people who will have comments as you bring them into the conversation. I see y'all's friends are here. So I'll just say quickly, the first study abroad that we did at Howard was the summer of 2005. It took about maybe a dozen students to South Africa. We were in Cape Town, Johannesburg. And the target was really to talk and think about that struggle in context. And so I won't go through any of it except to say that it just passed the 30th anniversary of Soweto, of course, June 16, 1976. The events leading up to it, the building, the pressure, got a chance to actually be with some of the folk because when we left Cape Town and went to Johannesburg for a week, we actually got a chance to not only spend some time in Soweto, but to be at the Hector Peterson Square, then the museum. His sister, who we, of course, have seen immortalized in that famous film with Hector Peterson running, being carried, and she's running alongside him. She was working at the museum at the time, so she took us around, and we got the chance not only to be there, but to be in conversation with some of the young people who, of course, then many of them in their 50s or around that era, who were in that movement. Who knew, I guess you could predict, that these cycles of struggle continued because I guess it was 2010, fallism, for those of you who remember Roads Must Fall and then Fees Must Fall and that this next generation of students, they traveled a play written by the students, some of the students who had participated, and they brought that play to the United States. And some of y'all, if anybody see that play, it was here in D.C., and then they brought it over to Ira Aldrich Theater, and those students were in conversation. But of course, now we're at the 50th anniversary. Tomorrow, about 60 Howard students are traveling. They are going to South Africa. Unfortunately, they're only going to Cape Town, but at least they're there, and they'll be able to bring in some of the conversation and be in conversation because it's the 50th, of course, anniversary of what happened on June 16th, 1976. And then in the wake, of course, the death of Steve Biko. Dr. Wyatt is back there. He's written on Steve Biko. She's going with us to Egypt. But rather than go through a tick-tock, because we looked at the film Uprise, but of events, what I don't want us to do is waste any more time getting right to the folks with Baba Twiggs. If you don't mind, Baba, if you will start maybe and give us some opening remarks. And then if you don't mind coming in after that, Dr. Hill, and then maybe set the context of what led up to that movement. And I do want to say one other thing, because the next time we convene around this conversation, we'll be talking about today, and some of that will bleed into, it's going to bleed naturally, I think. But one of the things that really struck me was it wasn't just the young people. It wasn't just the high school students. It wasn't just Sasso and the college students. The teachers who were pushing back. The parallels that were so striking between there, here, the Caribbean, the continent, this fight for intellectual warfare for self-determination grounded in culture. destroying teacher pipelines. You know, these teachers saying they're trying to push back, and then the students are pushing back, and then their parents and the people who are not political, but because of what happened on the 16th of June, got politicized, including students saying, where we going? We marching? Wait, somebody got shot. Next thing you know, everybody's in the street. Those parallels are really what we want you all to talk about as well, because, you know, this isn't just about archives and books. It's about the living archive of folks. So, Bob Twiggs, do you mind jumping in here at this point and give us your perspective of what led up to 50 years ago this year, and any kind of place you want to take it? And then, Dr. Hill, is just, like I say, when you show up, all these folks show up. So we're gonna have a good time. I want you to please just jump in after that and begin to narrate. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Twiggs Xiphu, and I'm honored and humbled to be with you today. I would like to just highlight the fact that what happened in 1976 had been building up from the early 70s, when there was a development of the Black Consciousness Movement, whose first organization was the South African Students Organization, founded by Steve Biko, amongst others, but he was the father figure of that. And from the 70s, there was a lot of activism within the campuses of South Africa. One popular uprising, for instance, was in 1972 at the University of the North. That also led to a number of students being expelled, one of them being Nkgopotse Tiro, who ended up teaching students at Morris Isaacson, where the students' uprising of 1976 began. And I thought I should highlight that. And the environment in 1976 happened at a time where young people, the students particularly, were reaffirming their cultural consciousness, their pride in being Black people. They were asserting themselves. They were also recalling their history, because it should be remembered that the history that was taught in our schools was a history that started in 1652 with the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck and so on, and all these other people. And there was hardly anything ever said about us. It's us who started teaching ourselves about our own history. So that is the environment in which when the settler colonial regime then tried to impose Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. So that is what then the students were resisting. While they were reclaiming their identity, you have a situation where the oppressor was actually trying to ram down this language, which was used, by the way, for technical subjects like science and mathematics. And you could not use it anywhere else, which were being trained to be perpetual slaves in South Africa. So that is the environment that is happening. So in June 16, the spark started in Soweto. And then, of course, it's always important to know that it spread all over the country. It went to different cities. Different cities caught the flames at the different times. In Port Elizabeth, for instance, where I was, after being expelled from Fort Hill, of course, it came through on August 18, 1976. In other places, I think Cape Town was in July and so on. So the flames that started in Soweto continued throughout that year, which is why I like the fact that this process is continuing throughout this year of 2026. Because not only did it continue until 76, when we were expelled, of course, I did say that then I ended up being a teacher, and then I had to again was confronted by the reality of this oppressive system of education. Of course, in that process, we had to be creative. I was part of those that we formed something called the Association for Science and Technology, and we trained people better in sciences. We felt that we needed to prepare them. Now, the regime took that we were teaching kids to develop bombs and so on, and it definitely was not our intention. Ours was to improve the system of education. Now, just before I stop, I said the August 18th is very important in Port Elizabeth because it is also linked, as you will see as we can continue discussion, with the death of Steve Biko. I can expand on that. Let me just summarize this in this way. That while in Port Elizabeth, June 16 happened on August 18. The following year, there was a preparation to commemorate our June 16, which was August 18. Pamphlets were distributed. People were mobilized. There was a stay away. It's during that, on that day, that the regime started looking out for troublemakers, and they happened to find Steve Biko and Peter Jones in a roadblock. And that is when, of course, they did interrogation. And by September 12th, as it has been known, Steve Biko was dead. And then thereafter, again, the uprisings continued and intensified until October 19th, Black consciousness organizations were banned. And of course, a lot of people were detained. I must say, before I pause, that I was lucky in 1976. I was not detained because we were doing what we call scuttling, running up and down different cities. Unfortunately, in 1977, I was picked up and I was detained, and the papers were saying Section 6 of Suppression of Terrorism Act. So that's briefly about me in 1976.
Thank you, Bob Chis.
Do
We
I
have a round of
continue?
applause. Yes, sir. Absolutely. We heard you loud and clear. Dr. Hill, please go right ahead.
Well, just to give a,
Can y'all hear? Is it on? Here, take this one. Let me. I'll get it. Thank you.
to give you a brief context too, actually in 1969.
Remember, hold it up like to the top.
Okay.
There we go.
And Nkrumah, President Nkrumah, had sent a letter to, then his name was Roosevelt Brown, later Paulu Karamaragoff. In the literature, that's the name you'll see mostly, although many people do put in parentheses Roosevelt Brown. He was from Bermuda. And he had written him about organizing or facilitating the possibility of a sixth Pan-African Congress, following in the tradition of the Du Bois Congresses, which all of you all know about, of course. And a set of young people here in the District of Columbia at the Center for Black Education, like Cortland Cox and many others. But they, and Jimmy Garrett, they all began to try to figure out how this could be done. One of the points I want to make that really helped shape that vision of the Sixth Pan-African Congress was the role of C.L.R. James, the great Trinidadian political theorist and activist, who had participated in the Fifth Pan-African Congress and felt very much that it was very important to host a kind of worldwide conference of people in the diaspora along with those in the continent. So there's much history about that in some books that you can read for further content on it. But one of the points I want to make about it is that we were in a very important period of history of the rise of Black power and self-determination. And many people had many different ways of defining what constituted Black power. But the important point about it was a kind of expression of self-determination and collective determination of Black people and institutional determination, and the reading of political theorists, like Fanon and like Emile Cabral and so forth. And we were also very much committed to trying to understand and felt very empowered by the notion of the fight for liberation in the region of Southern Africa at that time. And that there were national liberation movements there. And that part of what was thwarting the development of the national liberation and the assumption of state power from colonialism was the, you have to pardon me, a little allergy here. A part of our agenda on this was, for many people, it gave us a sense of a way toward empowerment and the assumption of state power and consolidating opposition to the U.S. foreign policy. It's very important to point because it wasn't just about expressing cultural only symbolism of African artifacts and expressions. It was also very important for us that we try to change U.S. foreign policy as a strategy to at least whittle away one of the great enemies of African liberation. And at that time, the United States, under every administration, argued that it was important to support South Africa because basically the Soviet Union then was in alignment with the national liberation movements. And so in order to carry forth an agenda, the anti-communist agenda that the United States argued was politically in their interest, the United States government, not the people, but the government, that they had to support the South African apartheid government, not the struggle of the people of South Africa for one person, one vote, let alone the national liberation struggles that were going on in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Cape Verde. So this band of people, one of them who was here actually, that consisted of, at the time, I think, when we first started organizing, it was 1972. And I think I was 32 years old at the time. And I might have, well, one other person was 34, so I think he was the oldest. But, aside from CLRJ, we were just a band of young people. And one of the lessons that I want to try, I've been asked to focus on lessons that we learned from this movement, but I just had to give a little bit of context to it. We set about trying to organize the Sixth Pan-African Congress. Now, there are a lot of internal dynamics to that I could go into, but I don't think that's a good time for us right now. So for example, just to give you an example, some of the people in the movement, there were national black efforts across the United States, principally dominated by males. In fact, I don't even know of one that had dominated by females, except that eventually one of the movements did have a good panel of both men and women, but organizationally it tended to be dominated by males. And that particular group felt very strongly that only people who were political leaders of progressive groups should be involved in the leadership and participation in the Sixth Pan-African Congress and shaping it. The leadership of Cortland Cox, Charlie Cobb, these were people that all came out of SNCC for the most part, the Southern Rhode Island. They all felt that we needed to take the maximum number of people to Africa that we could get on a plane. Now, we had two reasons, really. One, but the most political reason was that we wanted to increase the number of people who have had an experience in Africa so that when they return, they could begin to focus on changing U.S. foreign policy, or at least, politically educating other people. Whereas if you just had a few people go, that would weaken your potential to do that. And of course, the other reason was that the more people you had go, the cheaper the airfare would be, and so you could get more people there, right? Because it wasn't like we had a lot of money at all, and we had no money to finance anybody, really. So that's kind of the gist of that. But the important point about a lesson learned from that experience that I think had implications for later was that, we quickly found out that nation states have different interests than people, yes. Particularly political people. Yes. And I remember having a discussion with President Nyerere, in which, mind you, I was young. I had nerve enough to be chiding him about a decision. And he said to me, well, Sylvia, you can make any kind of decision you want to because you're political. You don't have to feed people. Mm-hmm. I do. There's certain concessions I have to make because I need other heads of state to collaborate with me in order for me to make, provide certain kinds of provisions for the people of Tanzania. So that was a lesson learned. I mean, there's so many different examples I could give you on that, but I just thought I would use that one. And it was a very important lesson because the liberation movements were very concerned that the participants would tend to focus more on the artifact culture of Africa as distinct from the political issues. And they very much wanted us to emphasize the political agenda, which, we did. And it was very important that the liberation movements talked to the delegation. And there was, the delegation, if you read the literature, they had political debates about whether race or class and should we support one movement over another because one was more class analysis versus race. So the gist of all of that, I want to say to you, a lesson learned, is something that Cabral, who unfortunately had been assassinated, but he's written, and I'm sure many of you know this. People don't struggle for ideas. They struggle for their material reality to change. And if you want to involve people and get them committed to the movement and ideas, you have to really be involved with them and show them. So another point about that is the role of culture, which we have to always keep in mind. And by culture, I really mean what we learned in the organization that we worked with, the Southern Africa Support Project, is that you have to really design your activities so that they meet the needs of the people you're trying to design, right? Now, most of us, one of the first things we learned is most of us were taught by people standing up lecturing us, right? I'm going to try not to do that right now. That's why I'm rushing through this so we can have a dialogue. But, and when we get ready to organize, we tend to do the same thing. We want to stand and tell people what we know, that we feel is unique, and that we have, a genuine historical purpose to pour it in your head. Well, that is not, as we know, that's not the way people learn. If you even think about your own academic experiences, those were not the most fruitful ones for you. So we had to, try to figure that out. And one of the things we did was to try to, if we wanted to talk about workers, the work conditions in South Africa or Namibia or Zimbabwe, we would talk about the work conditions going on in the United States in a particular sector and compare it to what is happening there and try to show the relationship between the two. So that just kind of gives you an example. But and another thing we did, we found that many people, there's the culture of gospel music. Now, I didn't know about it that much, but many people did. And we just decided we had to learn about it. And so we found somebody involved in producing those gospel concerts. And he was a very good singer, too. And, he said, well, you got to have a great master of ceremony or mistress of ceremony. Because that's what people come to see and hear. Now, we wouldn't have known that. We would have just had our regular little stand up and talk person. So those kinds of real basic kinds of lessons you learn, but they really are very important lessons. Because in my experience, what I've seen is that we alienate people sometimes, not intentionally, But because we're so narrowly in our own set of experiences, we don't see that they may not fit somebody else's need. So, I'll give you another example. At one point, we had a multiracial group. And in our effort to be equal, we had to practice that a white and a black person would go to talk in these churches to get church involvement. So, and this is the truth. I probably should never admit it for history's sake, but we went to Union Temple Baptist Church. And so gave this talk, showed film, had questions, answers, good participation, etc. So the woman came up to one of the church members. She said, "This was wonderful, but now, baby, you do not need a white man standing next to you for people to believe you." So she has seen it completely through the lens of her experiences, right? Our little experiences was sending the wrong message. So, I cite that example because I want to say to people that you can have the best of intentions sometimes, but if you're not really questioning what you're doing and having, as we used to say, criticism, self-criticism, and learning from that, you can make those kinds of mistakes. One of the other things I will say is that at a certain point, we kind of shifting forward, but the June 16th was very critical for us because it created a spark and a dynamic that it galvanized people. It didn't galvanize them out of nowhere. Like I said, things had been going on in the community around Black power, self-determination. We had various demonstrations as well. Film, the film done by Robert Van Lierop, Luta Contadua, had come out in '72. And that was the film that studied the Mozambican national liberation movement. And the important thing about the film was that it gave the viewer a sense of what it meant to have an armed struggle in that era, and what it meant to have a national liberation movement, as distinct from just running around trying to kill people, but a liberation movement that incorporate activities that prepare you to have the assumption of state power. And so in your liberated zones, you want to have both boys and girls going to school. You want to have, a kind of equality between men and women in terms of work and child care and so forth. And food preparation. You want to encourage the independence on farming for self, right? So that was very important as a lesson. And the other important lesson was there are phases to struggle. You can't just jump up and declare a national liberation struggle. There are historical phases, and the organizer has to be prepared to always know there's some history. Somebody was doing this before me. Let me try to figure out who they were and what did they learn from it and so forth. And then we can try to start from there. That was a very important lesson, and I encourage it all the time, because one of the things about getting involved in doing organizing and feeling, especially when you feel the pressure of the government on you, or when you feel like you're doing something unique, you feel like it's unique and you're the first person that ever thought of it, right? So there is a tendency to not spend the time to study what happened by whom before and what did they learn and so forth. And there is no community that you can't go in where something has not been going on. Now, they might have lost, a very great battle or gotten old and tired out or whatever, but somebody and some group of people have been doing something. And even if it was not quite meeting the challenge of the time, they were trying. And that you can learn from. So that's kind of another important point I want to make. The other point is that sometimes symbolic protests are very critical, and you should never underestimate the importance of a symbolic protest. So the Free South Africa movement was a symbolic protest in many ways. And what happened was, internal to South Africa, young people were just, going up against the apartheid system, and they were being slaughtered. To see or hear about that was very crushing to the spirit. And the question was, how do we protest this in a way that symbolizes the importance of what Black people and people of conscience think in this country about U.S. foreign policy in support of apartheid South Africa and the killing of these young Black youth. And the important point I want to make, to just interject there, is that there was not a lot of media like you have now. I just want to remind people in terms of technology, everything I've been talking about, we did not have a cell phone. We did not, the fax machine came in late. It was in the 80s, And I made the comment, we would win this revolution. We got the fax machine. It won't take us 7 days to get, mail to the continent. Well, that was a little inspirational, aspirational at that, right? So, but that's the kind of very key kind of point to kind of land on. And I know that we're kind of getting toward the end because we want to get back to but so I'm just going to wrap.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to say a couple of things. So I want to wrap up on the symbolic protest. And the mayor of then Gary, Indiana, Mayor Dick Hatcher, Richard Hatcher, late Richard Hatcher, called Randall Robinson of Trans-Africa. Trans-Africa was our black lobbying effort, and there's a whole history around that I don't have time to go into right now. But the important point about it was black people were beginning to have a unique set of experiences in larger numbers. That is, working on the Hill, meaning Congressional Hill, working in Congress people's offices, right? And learning the whole internal process. And I cite this as a lesson learned, important lesson. That set of people didn't just go and sit and just, walk around being important on the Hill. They studied that process. They knew how it worked. They lived what was going on and how it was going on. And as Cecily is here, every time you thought you had down to a T that you had mastered the art of what was going on, they would come up with something else. It'd be another rule, right? But, many people really did master that quite well. I cite that because I want to point out another lesson. Having an inside and an outside strategy is very important. It's hard to change a system if you don't know anything about it. Only advantage of it is you don't know anything about it, so you think you can change it. That's the only advantage I can see. But to actually change it and affect some change, you really have to know something about it. And you have to have people who are willing to share with you what's going on. And part of why the Free South movement be successful was they had the element of the inside people who knew what was going on. They knew who was writing what bill, what congressperson, no matter what his affiliation, whether they were pro or against. And they could tell you what the issue, where they may agree, where they don't. And that's very important information to have to shape whatever your strategy may be for trying to change U.S. foreign policy. And I keep pointing that out because we weren't just demonstrating to be demonstrating. We were trying to create political, social, visible pressure on the U.S. government, and there's various elements, but congressionally in particular, and I can't even describe to you the Senate versus the House and that complexity, but nevertheless, I'll just say Congress, we were trying to change. So we could affect policy. And for every step you made, there was an attempt to push it back, but you had to keep going. And so having protests kept the issue visible and alive for people. It gave the press something to focus on, which then focused on what was happening in South Africa, right? Because they couldn't just say, one of the things we did, for example, was when we had the demonstrations, we had people call the press and say, I was driving by Massachusetts Avenue and saw all these black people out there. What are they doing, right? And some of those people were white, with white-sounding voices, because that was, we were trying to create this pressure. We knew that, which was the more difficult point, in some member districts, if we could get local people to start raising issues about what was happening in South Africa and why was U.S. foreign policy supporting it, that would be a pressure point. In some places we were able to do it, in some places we weren't. But all of those are just some of the examples of why we were actually able to affect policy change. The last thing is Sylvia's law of serendipity. Sometimes, I don't care how much analysis you do, there's some imperceptible, as Marx would say, stream of what's happening that may just change the course of your success or failure, for that matter. And so never give up hope is my point about that. That's why you look for serendipity. And there are many examples during the Free South Africa movement where, something would happen. For example, we were having the demonstrations, and all of a sudden this group of Republicans write a letter to the Post and, have a press conference saying that U.S. foreign policy had to change because they did not want to look racist. I mean, basically was the gist of it, right? Now, they had no more interest in this foreign policy than they moved. They really were some radical Republicans who were trying to challenge the Republican stronghold in the House, the Senate. And this was their way of doing it. They just used the issue. Well, it worked, in the sense that there was another constituency of folks who were saying U.S. foreign policy of constructive engagement was wrong. So that's what I mean by serendipity. You say, well, where did they come from as such? So just to wrap up so we can get back to him, I will close, and there's so many people in the audience who were around during that time, and they have some wonderful comments. I see Mark Harrison is here. He worked in the church, lobbying on these issues, and Cecily Counts, she worked for both Trans-Africa and Labor, lobbying on these issues and mobilizing people and being a part of. That was the other thing that I will say. This wasn't my full-time job, and was nobody's full-time job. We all had other jobs. We did this at night, and worked around a kitchen table. For the Southern Africa Support Project, we didn't have an office, but we worked around the kitchen table because the real work was in the community. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. Uh-huh. Thank you, Dr. So a round of applause here. So we want to open it up for folks to be able to respond, to interject. Baba Twiggs, if there's anything you want to say in conversation with Dr. Hill, with Mama Sylvia about this. As I was sitting here, both of you, and listening and sitting here scribbling notes, a couple of things occurred to me. We went back in 2007 with some students, and I encouraged them to write an abstract. There was a Steve Biko conference. It's been 30 years since he had been killed. His son in Costamonte, the Steve Biko Foundation, hosted it. And I had the students write abstracts, and they all wrote abstracts and this kind of thing. I wrote an abstract to show them how to do it, and I sent mine in. I encouraged them to send theirs in, but then they wrote me back and said it was accepted. So I went back over it, and I'll never forget. Kenneth Kaunda came, and Jerry Rollins, Thabo Mbeki, of course. And I remember sitting there in conversation with them, and everybody was there and listening and thinking, the question of state capture, what do you do with a country once you caught the car? Just kept coming back to me because the rhetoric was very revolutionary, but as Judge Nyerere told you, you got to feed the people. When you said that, it reminded me of something that he said to Nkrumah. We just finished with over 1,000 people reading Howard French's book, The Second Emancipation, in this platform we have, Nubia. And one of the things that Howard French writes about is the founding of the Organization of African Unity. And Nkrumah wants it to go much faster. He's like, and Nyerere is like, yeah, man, but you got to work with these leaders. And Nkrumah basically said, yeah, but they're stupid. We have to, because they've seen them take Lumumba out, you know, and Eisenhower, then Kennedy, you know, they want to get rid of Nkrumah, but Ghana's too small, didn't think it's important. They just simply cannot have Negroes running Congo with all that uranium and all that other stuff. So they've done that to him. And thinking about that, watching these African leaders, I'm thinking, okay, the question of state capture is important. How do you run a nation state with a revolutionary mindset? And so as you were talking and coming back over and over again to the question of power, how do you get state power and capture state power? The second thing, when you said an inside-outside game, you got to have it. The idea of what happens once you've gotten inside and there's been a break in the chain of kind of transferal of that institutional knowledge, that memory. Because we have probably more people of African descent. There's a young sister right here, right now, Howard grad, who's at Harvard now, on the Hill. She's sitting back there now. I hope she'll jump in this. And there's more of us on the Hill than ever before. But if there's not a transmission of knowledge, we end up being in the very machine that y'all were pushing against. And in many ways, agents of that machine. I mean, not like a Ralph Bunche, of course, who we saw what happened to him in the 40s and 50s. He starts out in the 20s for self-determination. By the time they send him over to Lumumba, and then Lumumba like, now send me somebody with some power. I know you ain't send this nigga over here to go show him by half the state. But the other thing, finally, the question of culture you raise. With people who are not involved in political struggle, the songs, and Baba Twiggs, I know you've seen this and participated. I know everybody who has traveled, particularly among people of African descent, had to leave the country for this. You get the right song and everybody gonna be there in the space. You see that in South Africa. I swear I just thought, wait, does everybody know this song? The Babies? But of course, the first time I saw it in person, it was Jacob Zuma. That's a whole nother conversation. Because again, struggle bona fides, but he knew all the songs. So you can say what you want, critique his policy, but when Zuma come in the room, he had, and at the time I'm thinking, this is like looking at George Bush in Texas. He knows what to say to these folk. But the question of struggle and culture being a indispensable element, but then finally the question of study. Here at Sankofa, of course, there's the On My Mind series, Sudan on my mind, Haiti on my mind, Gaza on my mind. Political education. Is it possible to engage in the kind of struggle that could result in state capture without tapping into that culture? And you talked about Cabral, of course, he goes through that. Without having those study places that can feed a place like a Howard or any of our HBCUs or any of our other places, a place like Fort Hare, Bob Twiggs, where they put you out. But without those study places, like what you all did at the center here for education, black education, is it possible to engage in a struggle that will end up anywhere other than feeding this very system that has a very clear agenda to suppress any type of movement that's going to redistribute resources for anybody regardless of the color of their skin, do anything other than what it's doing? I said fine, but I want to mention this because I wrote this down. When you said the one advantage to not having inside information is that you think you can change this system. I know you didn't mean that in any cynical form, but I guess the question I should ask before we just spend the rest of the time with everybody here being in conversation, because you're right, some heavyweights in here, can it be changed?
Can we have Twiggs kind of respond to some of those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You want Twiggs?
Papa Twiggs, please. Yes. If you don't mind taking the first stab, and then or respond to anything, Mama, you heard from Mama Sylvia, or every way you want to take it, and then folks will begin to.
Okay, you may have noticed that my introductory part was very brief, and I was not sure how far could I go in terms of just making contribution. But one thing that I need to highlight, and of course, expression appreciation of taking from what Dr. Sylvia Hill was talking about, is the importance of solidarity and the support networks.
Yeah.
And that is something that still means a lot to us here. We also were driving. You know, there's a creed that we had in the South African Students Organization, which said we believe in the black dead, black living, and the black unborn. We believe that the black community has a prior call to our talents, and we shall respond when it calls. That is what was driving us as young people. Again, trying to make the change. We also realize that we always know that there have always been older liberation organizations like the African National Congress and the Pan-Africanist Congress that were in exile. But our youthful enthusiasm felt that these organizations were not doing enough, which is why we took up the challenge. In fact, not only that, again, it's nice to be young and energetic. We even thought when we went into exile, we were going to bring these organizations together because we felt that they've been gone long enough and they've not been talking to one another. Would you believe it? We tried. It is something that most of you may not be aware of. We tried bringing the ANC and the PAC together. So it's something that if you are involved in struggle, you're always trying things. I'm taking on the issue of the recognition of those that were there before we were there. That is what Dr. Hill did talk about. So at least if from our side, we tried our best. Of course, at some point in time, we also realized that maybe there may be differences in approach. And then, of course, as the Black Consciousness Movement, we formed ourselves outside as a Black Consciousness Movement of Tanzania, and even organized our own military wing, the Tanzanian National Liberation Army. Again, we still talk about the need for unity. I always make the important part that for us as SASO activists, we never saw the difference between our different formations. We always believed that at some point in time, which is actually what's happening now, without jumping into what's happening in South Africa, that our forces, or the forces are enlightened forces. I won't use the term of the formations of the left, because some of the formations are not necessarily left-leaning. But what is happening right now is there are the forces that have a revolutionary ethos, and they are coming together. There are discussions and negotiations that are going on in this country. And it's something that we appreciate and something that we're looking for. We're hoping that while we're still around, we will be able to achieve the ultimate goal of our national liberation struggle and social emancipation. Struggle we were going for, it's sad to say that we have not, sure, all of you all know that we've not totally achieved what we've been going for. Yes, we have the vote. Yes, we have been celebrated as having the most liberal, one enlightened constitution in the world, but we don't still own the means of production. We still don't own the land, our own land. We're still having all kinds of challenges. Young people are struggling to get into school, something that it still doesn't make sense, especially to me as a former teacher. Of course, I was not trained as a teacher, but I ended up teaching. Young people, even those that have degrees don't have jobs. There's a high unemployment rate. Crime is on the rise. Substance abuse. So that now, from being part of the protest movement, the liberation struggle, trying to make sure that we win what is ours, we are faced now with new challenges. These are the new challenges. And of course, linked with that is also something that has been mentioned that I had in this discussion, that political education is key. You can never lead people in organization without political education. People respond to things in the way they feel. For instance, I'm sure a number of people have been hearing about South Africans being xenophobic, which is very far from the truth. Yes, of course, there are also entities and formations that are harassing other people, asking for documentation and so on. But it also has to do with the fact that we have our political education is not as robust as it used to be. I always emphasize the importance that in any struggle, you need to have not only the organized people and the working people, but you need to have students being part and parcel of that struggle. Well, students have that capacity to imbibe and embrace theories and analyze them and digest them and so on, and then feed back into the struggle, which is what we proudly were products of. I mean, our reading of Fanon, Cabral, and all other leaders is something that we were proud of. Unfortunately, we don't have that much now, but it's something that we still need to battle. We still need to engage with our people. We need to educate our people. Over the years, we've had different communities and people from the continent being here in South Africa. Unfortunately, the developments of the past few months are showing a different side. And I think the media also occasionally, depending on who is whose side they are on, is also gobbling that up. And it's also easy to have people selling or saying bad things about our country. Yes, we do have challenges, but we also have to deal with the fact that we also have right-wing formations are on the rise in South Africa. They are reorganizing. They have access to different institutions, including the United Nations. They have sold the lie that there's a genocide of white people. And a number of them have been shipped in the US. Again, this emphasizes the need for us to maintain our networks of solidarity that we had in the 70s, of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. The fact that people can lie to a country blatantly and without being an uproar from within the US, for instance. Not that I expect people to move to campaign for us, but it's something that we find it's kind of strange that we're having these people also getting accepted. They get celebrated and touted in the US of America. Point I'm making is that while we have the vote, the franchise, but we still have a long way to go. And there is a need for us to continue this work of solidarity and working together. We also have, over the past few months, there's a group of those who happen to have lived and studied in the US, including those that also were there even earlier. We have formed a South Africa United States collective. It's an organization of all the people, and a lot of them now are in business, some are professionals, some in government, so on. But we are reorganizing that, and we've had our very successful in Bizo. We are constantly looking for to reach out to institutions. One of the institutions, for instance, that we have we've already reached out to is Howard University, of course, my alma mater. But we're also looking for all other organizations. We don't know if organizations like Trans-Africa, Washington Office on Africa, I don't know if some of those organizations still exist and so on. But we just need to, the challenges that we're confronted right now require us to again reorganize, reconnect, but at a different level.
Indeed.
Yes. And of course, by the way, other than the fact that yes, I was expelled from Howard, from Ford University of Fort Hare, ended up in exile. went to Botswana. And of course, January 13, 1979, that's when I landed in the US. Studied at Howard University and worked while I was there, but organized while I was there. I was fortunate to have touched almost every state in campaigning for sanctions in South Africa. Thank you. Just want to share that little bit of my history. I'll wait for questions, if any.
Okay. Twiggs reminds us, too, that the struggle is long and the struggle is hard. And that,
Yeah.
you know, the point that you raised, Dr. Carr, do we ever really win? And the question is no, not like win in a complete transformation. If you think about it, it's not possible, right? Because change is ever taking place. So whatever success you have at this point may not be what you need at the next phase. That's why Comrade Mulan over Frelimo out of Mozambique always said, "A luta continua," the struggle continues. Because it does.
Yeah.
And one of the points he's making about, Twiggs is making about the necessity for having political education. Now, what I've observed in the process of the assumption of state power, and it was one of the reasons why during the liberation movement you have to try to reconfigure a state in the liberated zones. But I do want you to imagine that when you assume state power, it's not like you know a lot about how to run anything. As complex as these bureaucracies that we want to assume. So you're in the mode of learning that. Right? And so then what gets neglected are the people, the political education that got you there. That's what gets neglected. And there are contradictions that emerged. So, for example, if you're in the National Liberation Movement structure, and another set of people assume state power, they have greater money. You see them with bigger cars. They get bigger houses. Right? You see all of the class contradictions emerge. Now, it's not just I'm jealous of you either. It's more complex than that, because once you get those kind of contradictions, then you're subject to being derailed by hostile forces. And you do have hostile forces. Other governments who have interest in your mineral wealth, or they feel like they still deserve to be in power, right? So imperialism is real. I know we say the word, but you need to study it because it is real. It is a very complex system with many, it has a bureaucratic aspect, it has a finance aspect, it has a cultural aspect. I mean, it's an expression of capitalism that's all-consuming. And we see in our everyday lives how capitalism, the most honest of expressions can become a capitalist venture for somebody, right? And, before you know it, the process has been taken over for some kind of gain beyond the noble objectives you might have had. All of that's just point is reality. It's not to say we shouldn't do it, because we have to do it. The point is we can't romanticize it. We cannot look for manna in heaven dealing with bureaucracies, right, and capitalism. And world imperialism. It doesn't work that way. So we have to be ever vigilant. And I say to people, you have to learn how to enjoy struggle. That's because it has to be joyful. Yes, you can't make it miserable. You don't get together to be miserable. Yes. You have to learn how to enjoy it. That's why culture in the form of songs and so forth can be very important, because it gives just a point of upliftment. And I can remember. I remember we were in Mozambique, and we went to meet some South African students during the apartheid regime, right on the border. And I said, if I get out of this alive, I'll be doing well. But so we had this meeting, right, on the line, so to speak. And they started singing. I said, my goodness, everybody can sing. I couldn't say a word, but the point, and be in tune anyway. But the point is, when you said that, I thought of that. But the songs are a motivator and a joy. And if you noticed, when South African youth were facing, they were, they had a rhythm, the Soweto rhythm. And that was what gave them strength to go up against the armed forces with greater armed and the legal right, given that they were in control of the nation state, to shoot.
Let's get some folks in here. And now I'm going to ask you to help us, Dr. Hill, who you want to bring into this conversation. I don't know if there's anybody. You've named a couple of people, and I do want to mention
Let's just ask if anybody wants.
If anybody wants to jump in, we'll give the microphone. For the young people who may be watching, because of the technology, we can stream. One other thing that I thought about as you both were talking, was that trip that some of the members of SNCC and Ms. Hamer took to Guinea.
Yes.
With Sekou Touré. And that intersection there as a kind of grounding. And then I think Ms. Hamer saw some, Peace Corps folk over there. What y'all doing over here? Y'all need to go back over to the United States and help. You want to help Africans, you can help Africans over here. And then also finally the essay that your comrade and our brother and elder Charlie Cobb wrote in Black World in 1972, Notes on Returning Home. When you talk about don't romanticize Africa, I just thought that if you don't mind saying something, and then we'll just get everybody. Somebody put their hand up, we'll bring you the microphone. Okay. All right, go ahead. No, I don't know if you have any, because that trip was so important. You don't see a lot of people writing about it.
No, but one of the important points he made was that we may have noble reasons for why we want to go to Africa and be in Africa, but we have to recognize, too, that there can be class conflict. Yes. That was one of the points. That, the up-and-coming class can perceive you as not a threat, but in competition to them, so.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Antoinette Yvonne Jefferson. I wanted to say thank you to the esteemed panelists. It's been great. I wanted to start by saying I went to South Africa with the group trip with Dr. Greg Carr and a few others in 2007. It was a great cultural and educational experience for me. That was my first. I think that was my first trip out of the country. And I had someone say to me, the first place you want to go is to the motherland, or to the country, or to the our home country. And so I wanted to ask: Henry Louis Gates talks about the trickster figure, right? The idea of the Isu, and then I think there was
and he's an expert on that.
And he's an expert on that, exactly. I read. I didn't read it like that. Okay, that's not what I didn't read it. I was not dittoing that. Okay, that's not what I meant.
I mean, on that first book.
Okay, I read the too. Okay, about 20 years ago, I think I read a little bit about the signifying monkey.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and that's oh Lord. So I wrote my thesis was in part my undergraduate thesis. I have 8 degrees. My undergraduate thesis was about was about the Isu and that the trickster figure and the unborn. And I wanted to ask, in terms of, I think, Greg, you were talking about the transmission of culture and the breaking the chain of custody. Well, not custody, a chain of cultural transmission. Once you go from the beginning of, I guess, starting a movement or protest and wanted to maintain that cultural history, the culture, the political messages, the symbolism that's important as part of the movements to reorganize and start a new phase of re-Africanization and Pan-Africanism. And so my question is, when I brought about the trickster figure, do you think any of our leaders, when I think about Steve Biko or I think about Patrice Lumumba, those types of leaders in the countries outside the United States, also in the United States, Kwame Ture, those types of things, do you think there's a role of the trickster figure, not as a joke, but the role of a trickster figure in terms of the movements and the leadership and the protests also? Do you think there's a role there for them to play in order to mask the movement until their success and power wielded from generation to generation? And that's all.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. I would ask you all to really talk about that some perhaps in the context, and thank you for that, because sometimes people come into a thing thinking one thing and then the apparatus can capture them. And maybe a few more words in this context on Trans-Africa. There's an excellent new book that's come out, and Sankofa hosted a reading of it, House of Diggs, on Charles Diggs. And we think about, of course, Randall Robinson, and then there's the early Congressional Black Caucus, the Africa thrust there. And then over the years, if there's if there aren't widely known spaces for continue to maintain, you said, what'd you say, Bob Twiggs? That gets, and then you said it as well, it gets neglected once you've gotten in. I think people who may end up looking like tricksters didn't go in there thinking that that's what was going to happen. But if you don't have a strong outside space, that maroon space to keep feeding you and nourishing you, when you mentioned C.L.R. James, the name that popped in my head as well was George Padmore. Oh, yeah. If Padmore hadn't, when Nkrumah shows up in London as a student, he's got Ras McConnell, Paul and Essie Robeson have been through there, WASU, West African Student Unions, and then there's Padmore. And there's that African kind of news bureau and that Friends of Ethiopia. And so when he gets to Ghana, he's already had his political education. And I'm thinking about that because I'm not sure. There are many institutions here that kind of, right now, that kind of are there. But when you talk about the serendipity, if Padmore had lived 2 more years even, but Nkrumah was looking for somebody to help him. And then when he locks up, what was it, Dankwa, I think he puts in jail, and C.L.R. James writes him the letter like, man, you can't be replacing Supreme Court justices. You about to lose. But he doesn't have that space to help him, and he's trying to start schools and education, universities. Like Lumumba, there's nobody in the place that can take over. The white dude who runs the army is still over the army. I mean, it's a desperate rush. Nyerere is they're all trying to do it. But I guess trickster figures, and for me, one of the people who kind of helps us understand that is Ayikwe Armah. When Armah's like that first generation of people who are trying to get an education, but then their money gets good, and I get a car, and I get a house. I didn't come in here not to be a revolutionary, but I like not having to beg, not knowing where my food is coming from, my meals coming from. So I guess pursuant to this energy, and I'm going to shape it into a better question, I know what they were trying to do and are trying to do with the Biko Institute, Baba Twiggs. And I know how important Trans-Africa was and is. What do you see today that tries to do that kind of work? Because it does seem that over the years, because that transfer maybe hasn't been as robust as we would love to have had, the Congress people of today don't look like Mickey Leland. Don't look like, I'm not saying that they should, but I'm saying because time passes, situations adapt and change. But have there been those robust spaces to continue that? Do you think there would be more of that kind of front-facing, outward-looking, so that a Ilhan Omar or a Ayanna Pressley or any of these could then say, okay, I've got this external thing feeding me, and we've really been able to continue to push on U.S. foreign policy because they're brilliant and they're working hard, but without that space. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts about that in South Africa or here in the United States, if you want to take it, Mama Sylvia, and then we'll get to the next question.
Well, As I said, the struggle is long and the struggle is hard.
Oh, yeah, I think
And
they
I
want you to
mean
have
that- and I don't
the
mean
microphone,
that-
Mom Sylvia.
I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a trivial way. But when I say that, I'm simply trying to point to, you have to, we're maybe in a lapse right now. Not a lapse, but a period. And there are things happening,
Yes, ma'am.
right? Just like sitting in this room.
Absolutely.
Just like the work that Louise and them do on WPFW.
And this brother Dave, I
um,
love. I hope you're gonna jump in this in a minute. Yeah.
All of those kinds of activities, they keep hope going alive and keep a focus on issues and content, important political content, so that if and when
Yes.
a spark happens, that set of people are prepared to come forward, just like we did with the June 16th coalition on June 16th. I can remember Paul Pumphrey, A.C. Burr. People just call Clarence Lusane was there. He was a student, and Sharikiana. Just a whole bunch of people. We all met at what was then called Pride, that Marion Barry had started on 16th Street, which is another quick point I want to make. Space is important, people. Don't lose space. It's both physical space and political space. And I say that to say, we didn't have WPFW when we started out. That came along in 77, I think it was. WHR had just started, and people were really trying to work out how they could have political content plus learn the technical part plus put music and other kind of interesting things on public affairs and so forth. So I would also encourage us to always give breadth and depth and love to our people, even when they get on your last nerve. Because a lot of times you don't know, you can't see it all the time. You can critique. Now, I'm not saying to just accept, whatever anything people say or do. But you have to be willing to stay open, to try to study where is this going, and what are these people up to, and what are they doing? Because all the time you don't know. And I just think we're in that kind of phase right now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's heavy. Go ahead. Oh, you got it. Thank you. Sorry, I keep wanting to.
My name is Davon. I do work in Baltimore, around the state of Maryland, with Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Really appreciate the panel and the discussion. My observation of the last generation of political advocacy in the mainstream in the United States is that there's been a historiographical assault on revolutionary Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism as a political methodology. I think there are a variety of different arenas of work that Pan-Africanism is present, but in the kind of formal political landscape, I think over the last generation, there's been an attempt to discredit and in some ways even untether revolutionary Pan-Africanism from some of the things that, you think about reparations, which something explicitly comes out of revolutionary Pan-Africanism, but contemporary iterations of it try to take it away or away from Black nationalism. When I think about the Soweto Uprising in 76, it's clear to me that it's tethered to the Black consciousness movement. And so my question is, do you observe a similar kind of historiographical attack on Black consciousness in the way that I'm describing revolutionary Pan-Africanism in the United States? And if so, what is your sense as to the mechanisms of that historiographical assault? So for instance, I think about, here in the United States, I think about many of those that have platforms in mainstream politics. If you're a nationalist, it's almost seen as like a death sentence, like a political death sentence for a lot of folks. And you think about Barack Obama and his emergence, which creates this shadow where it's funneling legitimacy in terms of Black thought away from that. And sometimes I suspect that maybe the narratives of Mandela, right, discourage. So my question is really just about, if that is indeed the case, what are the mechanisms in South Africa of that kind of historiographical assault on the viability of revolutionary Pan-Africanism as an effective methodology?
Twiggs stands to that. He's in South Africa.
Please, you want to ask him what he thinks of it? Yeah, he jumped in. Did you hear about Twiggs? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The struggle is real, as was quoted here. It's a luta continua. I can start from even within our own, as far back as the 80s. The condemnation or criticism or efforts to destroy those who had adherents of Black consciousness was not only real from the enemy, as it happened with the killings of our leaders, Steve Biko, Mapetla Mohapi, and the first leader to be killed by a bomb in Botswana, Nkgopotse Tiro. That was one crude and brutal one. And then there was also misinformation. Some people old enough to know that there were efforts to discredit leaders like Stephen Biko. Some had even called him at some point in time. Now, they were supposed to be part of the liberation struggle. It was even called CIA. So various efforts had been made to discredit Black consciousness, to the point that there were physical attacks, killings of numbers of people. Now, at stage 8, those efforts continue. Now, they're continuing in a different form, in the sense that now people are saying that, no, we don't really need Black consciousness now. We're all liberated, we're okay, we're all equal, which is a lie. There are also efforts that are aimed at discrediting or even rewriting history. I mean, the revisionist tendency of our history. To the extent that also the dispensation that came about in 1994, the forces within the Black consciousness movement and Pan-Africanist movement did not fare very well. And I would say, yeah, it may have to do with other organizations being more organized, but there was also clear efforts of undermining this. And this continues to this day. It's something that we can't moan about. It's something that we need to organize against and fight against. And what we had, and something that I kept emphasizing on, is when we talk about the history of our struggle or the alliances and the solidarity between our peoples here and the people in the diaspora, or particularly in the US, there are always things that in our circles, in our discussion, in our chat group, we always make references to, I don't know how many of you all know Brother Mukasa, who was with the AEPRP, a brother who was recognized as having coined the expression of Black power. Here in South Africa, an expression that is associated with Steve Biko, Black man, you are on your own. Yes, it was, he popularized it, but it was also coined by another comrade of his, Bani Pichani. So that, but those things are never taught, so that they're never highlighted. We need to teach our people. We should not complain about the fact that there are efforts of discrediting us. As has been articulated here, when we talk about the forces of capitalism, when we talk about imperialism, which is the highest state of capitalism, that's a reality. It's something that is real. Can even say, even from a personal perspective, some of the personal challenges as an adherent and as a leader of the Black consciousness movement. Some of the challenges one had to be faced with. I know a lot of you wouldn't know this, that even my studies in the US got disrupted. I had to fight battles. I'm sure there may be clips of me fighting deportation, where you had a situation where the South African government was trying to get me back into their country, to be deported by the US government to South Africa. To the extent that there was a publication in the Baltimore Sun lying, saying that I lived in England and so on, so I needed to be deported. I'm just using a personal example. But the efforts are there of fighting the forces, revolutionary forces. But at the same time, some of you who may be keeping up with the news here, this part of the world, there is a reorganization, a reemergence of voices that again are trying to call for the restoration of the dignity of our people in our struggle. Over the past few days, there was an entity called Vuka Azani. I'm still not sure about what it is, but it's a very interesting concept. They call themselves, they're a think tank. It's made up of lawyers, former officials of government, and of course, there's also in there one Reverend Bosak, who was one of the leaders of United Democratic Front. So yes, there are efforts. It's a lifelong struggle. If you have defined the enemy and you fight, because the reality is we've never defeated our enemy here in our country. That's number one. Number two, we have a very unique situation of settler colonialism before I get into this system, where the folks are here. If they can't fight you, they find proxies, they find entities, they find organizations. Right now, the fact that South Africa has how many, I don't know, I've lost count, hundreds of political parties. And the number of them are funded by what? You will read about the fact that Stellenbosch is funding them. Stellenbosch is nothing else but a bunch of very super rich Afrikaners based in Stellenbosch, in the farming area. So that the efforts against the forces of progress or revolution or revolutionary forces of Pan-Africanism and Black consciousness are being fought in different ways. But I always say, as I always say, even to my colleagues and comrades, yes, that might be true, but we also have a responsibility. The conditions of our people have not changed. We have an obligation to talk to them, educate them, mobilize them, and provide guidance. We may not have control of state power. State resources are also occasionally used for wrong reasons. It's something that we as a country are still battling with. We've been listening to a number of testimonies now showing how some of our institutions, now I'm talking about as a country now, have been taken over by people with criminal tendencies, especially the police. Again, that's all the forces that are aimed at just undermining our struggle for social emancipation. Thank you.
Great question. I think he covered it all, and all you can say, this is very descriptive, it's a model. We are going through this enough now where we can have kind of like a blueprint of what's going to happen, right? Because it's not new now. And we see, he gave a very good description of the forces that you can predict that will try to revert your change. There's a question back there.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Bob.
First, I want to thank the
Please stand
panelists.
up if you don't mind, so we can see you. Plus, they got the crack family.
I want to thank the panelists for taking your time to share your insight with us, Dr. Hill, Dr. Carr, and Baba Twiggs. I've got two quick questions. I'll give the second question first. Dr. Carr, you mentioned earlier about what happens when you actually catch the car. So my question is, for any of you, do you consider Traoré in Burkina Faso as an example of catching the car? And how do you think he is doing with that? And then my first question for you, Dr. Carr, is being professor over at Howard, we know a lot of revolutionary activism in the 60s and 70s were done by young people of that age. How do you see the current, the way social media is, the attention span, quote unquote, of Generation Z? Do you think that it is a hindrance or a help in terms of keeping activism going among young people?
Let me just say this very quickly. There's a lot of folks who are teaching, brother, in the room here. Of course, you mentioned Clarence back there, Luzane. You taught many years. Derek Musgrove from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County's back there. A lot of other folks here. I would just say this very quickly, brother, as someone who is used as my model at Howard and anywhere else. The Garimas, particularly Haile Garima, sitting over in the cut. At some point, he's going to get up and say something. You're going to have to. But when you said it's important never to can give up space, I can't tell you how many times I've been out on 14th Street or U and wished I could have walked in y'all's bookstore. I just wish, but every time I come in here, I feel like this is a child of that struggle, you know what I'm saying? So, but I'm saying that also in the context, brother, of, and I'll mention Traoré, and I think it'd be very interesting, particularly since you were in those spaces, and Cabral, and of course Thomas Sankara, whose books are available here for purchase. You have a direct lens to be able to size this young brother up and see what he's trying to do. So I can't wait to hear what you all say this, and I'll end with this. The uncharted territory of the assault on our attention span, the deliberate assault by people who don't let their own children have these devices, of those who are shepherding this AI. And it's beautiful to see people whose politics are completely opposite saying, we don't want the data center either. That's maybe one of those unintended consequences you're talking about, right? Utah, these hillbillies in Georgia, we don't want it either. So, well, maybe there's a chance for some solidarity politics, Bob Twiggs. But I would say this. I believe, and I moved this way through the world as a graduate of a state HBCU, that there's only one HBCU globally. I don't care whether it's Fort Hare or UE or Howard or any of these places, and that they're just different locations, but that class dimension is a real and persistent, continuing thing we have to push back against. Haile Greenwood was never a dean or the president or the provost and had to fight for every inch that he had over there at Howard. I continue the same. I've moved almost all of my intellectual work away from the HBCU. I look at it as a place to recruit people to come over here, not to reinforce a structure that is increasingly neoliberal, and that unfortunately, just like those days, early days of independence in Africa and in the Caribbean, tends to attract people who don't yet know what their politics is, but they know they want to serve, into a space where the message is consistently, yeah, okay, you can wear a little kente cloth at graduation and you can learn a couple of African words and be in some, but don't mess up that internship. Don't mess up that inclusion, that representation. So I think the intellectual work of building independent and self-determining spaces feeds those spaces, like the one across the street, or the University of Fort Hare, Bob Twiggs, as you mentioned, it was just so important, or the University of the Western Cape, or any of those folks. But I am wondering, for both of you, if you have any observations on differences, pursuant to this question, differences between the institutions that flowered and that you all fed as young people in the 70s and 80s, and then we continue, even though each generation, as Fanon would say, would identify the mission and do what they need to do or not, and now, in terms of young people who seem to be very open to the same impulses, but maybe don't have the same type of people like a Sterling Brown or, in the spaces that can nurture that, feed it, and kind of push it along. But anyway, yeah, so I don't think I have any thoughts about those.
Well, first of all, regarding Traoré and so forth,
please.
don't know him, and I haven't been to the country, so I have to start out by saying that.
Just close, no, closer to you. No, it's
Oh, okay. Is it sounding better? So I'm, I'm just reluctant to make any kind of comment that has any import beyond what many of you would say. And that is, from what I can see online, he is trying very hard to, reconcile the elements of the administrative state on behalf of development that is much more grounded for people improvement than purely bureaucratic, right? So, that's a change, that's a step forward. And so we have to study it. One of the things I've always really cautioned, and it's very hard in capitalism or imperialism, is the joy we get from celebrity. And everything, if we can't feel this a celebrity nature or character to whatever, whomever it is, or whatever they're doing, we tend to, just have problems here. And I am trying.
organizational. I want to stop short of being critical of them, but it's like they say, you go to conference, oh, I'm working on, well, do you know any of these? Have you had any conversation? No, I've looked in the papers. No, wait. Is that, should that, any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just say again, when you're looking at whatever for you, you should approach it carefully and with, John desire. You weren't there, you don't know what the intention was, and as far as I'm concerned, you're almost passing along gossip. Because these people, they come, they take notes, and they're writing notes. Remember, they have a personal interest of appearing like they have information too. Right to their scenario report. So you just have to be very cautious because these are the seeds of discontent.
And one of the seeds of discontent is to make people feel that there's nobody you can trust, that, everybody's out for their own personal interest, and that somehow, it's just better to not get involved, right? And you do that by sowing these seeds of discontent and misinformation. They do train you on this stuff, too. I was supporting justice.
So, Baba Twiggs, if you want to jump in, maybe we get one more comment, question. Yes.
Quite a bit has been said about Traore, but I'll just make this comment about the fact that in many circles, especially here in this part of the world where I am, he's seen to be moving in the rhythmic pulse and step with the people. There's a lot of excitement. Of course, the French and other imperialist forces are not totally happy with him. So there have been also these various efforts of undermining him. It is also a fact that, he's relatively still young, come from the military. You can't just move a country through a military process. There's a need for a deepening of revolutionary theory and understanding. And he may not necessarily be the ultimate person. Maybe another person can actually take the process forward. But it's somebody that is getting a lot of support from where I am. Moving on to the academic side of things. There's a sad state of affairs. I know I've had these visits to Southern Africa from the US. University of Fort Hare, the oldest university in this continent, in this part of the world, and that has produced a lot of leaders, is losing its status, other than its own internal fights and so on. But a lot of kids pay lots of money, lots of dollar rents to go to these historically white universities because they are supposedly credited and credible. And it's something that saddens us. And we feel that if, for instance, the reorganization, the reconfiguration of HBs, the historical black universities and colleges in the US, entities like University of Fort Hare can be actually embraced and be linked with, or even this University of Mali. I think there is a need for what I would call sort of academic revolutionary consciousness, so that from a Pan-Africanist perspective, to reach out and hold hands. It's a sad situation that we are in. And by the way, as much as they at Fort Hare, I think I needed to point out one more thing. University of Fort Hare that kicked us out in 1976, in 2010 or 2012, they apologized. One of the vice chancellors gave us certificates of attendance. Those of us that were kicked out, so we were also given certificate. It's still, University of Fort Hare needs a lot of support and assistance. So that when you guys land, don't just land in Cape Town and go to Western Cape and UCT. Right. Please try and find your way to the Eastern Cape. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. That's the one thing we couldn't pull off. I wanted to go to Fort Hare. That's what he said. Let's get one more. Go ahead, and then we'll begin to wrap it up.
Hi.
I'm gonna do what you do to me, Holly. I'm about to give you this microphone.
I'm Jeff Kennedy. Thank you for all this insightful conversation. You mentioned earlier you were talking about AI and its effect and how they're going about changing Africa. I think everyone probably has one of these in their pocket or somewhere on their body or somewhere around them. And each one of them has now an AI. The same methods that they use to train and teach and take over the mind is now right there in your hand. Misinformation, deep fakes in Africa. AI is what I call digital eugenics. The same movement in South Africa that started apartheid is the same one they put right here in our school system. It's the same one they've been using for hundreds of years. I mean, well, for at least 100 years or more. So when you start talking about the disinformation, that disinformation is getting the little children quicker now. Will hollow out Africa. You know, you got people in Africa working for $1 a day, talking about they're working for multinational, these tech companies. So when you start thinking about what is AI and why are they putting so much money into it, the biases. There's a woman I was talking to, she's doing a film called Ghost in the Machine 2026. I would take a look at it. I would take a look and think about that. What is it doing to here, colonizing the mind?
Thank you.
Then you come up. Appreciate you. All right, y'all. Any thoughts before we?
No, I thought you
Okay.
summed it up. I mean, we all have our angst about AI,
Indeed.
right? And like anything, you know, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
And the question is to grapple with it and figure out what we're going to do about it. That's the question. It's like, you know, if you want your kids to have a different view of the world, you have to have your independent schools.
Yes. Yes.
And when I say seize the space, one of the ways that I got really in terms of labor, of activism consistently was an after-school program started by a mother and myself in Minnesota, right? Because we were working at Macalester College, and they had a black cultural program that the Reader's Digest had given money to. And, but it gave us money to have a space like this, right, where we could have children after school and on Saturdays in our African education program. So when I say seize the space, I mean that short of you living on an island that's uninhabited, and even then it's impacted by climate change and et cetera, policies, you know, you have to grapple with the system of oppression. And you want to create alternative strategies to accomplish the goals that you have set out. Samora Michelle really stressed you have to have political objectives, which is one of the points that Twiggs is making too.
Twiggs, any final thoughts? And we'll ask Haile to close us out before we go.
Hello?
Here he comes. Go ahead, Baba.
No, go ahead, my brother, from South Africa, wherever you are.
You got it, Baba.
Go ahead.
I missed that. Hello.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay. Let me do this because I think.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Okay. On this.
Go ahead.
On the AI issue, I have an analogy or the Uzi. Many years ago, met a Palestinian activist who were having engagement and talking about a weapon, an Uzi, which is developed by Israel.
Right.
And there's this activist revolutionary says that, listen, in our case, an Uzi is a reactionary weapon. But in the hands of a revolutionary, it gets transformed into a revolutionary weapon because it is used in the pursuit of our struggle. But to the issue then, so is the case with AI. The reality is some of these things, and I don't want to run away from us being cautious, but some of these developments are here and are with us, and our kids are picking them up faster than you can even think. In fact, in our country, I don't know about you guys that side, it's the kids that are even faster even teaching us about AI. And the last part, which is slightly funny, but it's a reality. There's one department, I won't mention its name here at home. It was asked to develop a policy on AI. And guess what? The officials used AI to develop the policy, and it was found out. So it was rejected. Anyway, yeah, so we have to deal with it. We'll find ways of making sure that at least it's used in the interest of our people and our development for the pursuance of progress as opposed to regression. Thank you.
That's the one you told me about. I got it.
Yeah, you have to announce it when I finish talking. Because thank you again. Thank you, my Sister Hill. You've always been in our movies because you speak a progressive, revolutionary idea. You've always been our crutches, using you in our films to tell our story. And I want you to know I have so much respect for you that I'm nervous to speak here because I'm going to disagree about a few things with you.
Oh,
and how can somebody?
I knew that.
How can one, disagree with a sister like Dr. Hill, dialectician? She's a very important dialectician. She knows how to look at it from all directions. I think we saw that today, and it's my greatest respect for her. But I want to tell you this. I think the South African sisters that fought here day and night when I was actually just working on my paycheck at Howard, these sisters, for me, exemplify the highest expression of true Pan-Africanism. And the new film I finished, I used African Americans in the film, the Black Lions, Roman Wolves, in the film, because of the role they played in the liberation of Ethiopia during the occupation of 1935 Italian occupation. So I look at them like that. Sister Hill, our sister over there, is also hiding. Another Sister Hill was there. It was amazing. Majority of them women, and brothers few, if they were missing. Maybe Clarence was there. I don't think he was there. I don't think he was marching. I think he was finishing his PhD to get a job like me at Howard or somewhere.
Well, the good thing was he was writing books.
Okay. So let me say this. One is this. To me, the South African struggle was hijacked at the time Mandela enters into picture. It was hijacked by Mossad, and I'm not telling you mysticism. I'm going to tell you a book you should buy. Mossad, the CIA, British MI, South African boss. They all together worked when Soweto kids blew it off, they trembled like hell, never before. They realized their story is ending. And they went desperate on many things, including more violence, more killing, including Stephen Biko's death. Now, I say that and leave it there. Find out, research, read like me. This book is powerful. It's about how all these international CIA agents joined together to keep South Africa the length it kept this far. It's almost the Gaza story in a different direction. The other thing I want to say is I think independent war in Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Guinea, the War of Independence is known as, and kicked into the liberation struggle in Africa from Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Angola, and finally South Africa. At that time in 1978, starting 1978, I went to Africa to do a film called Around the Fire, using South Africa, the last stage of the anti-imperialist struggle in Africa. I went and met liberation struggle people in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, etc. Zambia, not Mozambique, one of them was not still free. Zambia. I met a lot of the liberation struggle movement leaders. Most of them know they come from Catholic, Pentecostal religion, and their Marxism was dogmatic, feudal. This is what a lot of the left-wing people did not realize. They were feudal. They present a paper on the women question, they're feudal inside, in the way they oppressed women when they came to power. They talk about the new man, the new women, in the way in Cuba it was discussed, in Mozambique, Angola, etc. None of them believed, majority of them didn't believe it. I've been in Angola, and I'm not saying anything I didn't want to say I just want to say that we sometimes take our people for the mouth they speak, instead of the essence, which brings me to the most important part of the discussion. In my film that I wanted to do that never happened because there was no finance, although I did the research all the way to Africa, many places, including to Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Kenya, etc. In the film, I wanted to say, armed struggle in Africa is over with South Africa. And after that, mental revolution has to take place on the cultural sphere. Because I know my people more than, this is my whole life study on Africans. The mental liberation meaning what? The way we see the world, good, bad, ugly, good nose, bad hair, etc. Our cultural notion is white supremacist fundamentally. We're feudal, we're white supremacist in how we think and see. So the revolution, the cultural revolution is waging war on the thought system. How our brain thinks, conditioned by Catholicism, Pentecostal, feudalism, and the false tribalism that Europe created in Africa. So as far as I'm concerned, we're at the doorstep of, even in here, the African-American struggle is paused at the doorstep of the cultural revolution that needs to take, the guerrilla warfare needs to take inside the head, combating how we see what we think of aesthetics, beauty, ugly, etc. Without that revolution, African consciousness has no place. And then, last point I want to make. When I went there 17 times to South Africa, now I refuse to go. I never showed my new film anymore. Why? Because I saw the ANC people decided, the ones in power, not all of them, there are people who are disillusioned outside the system. They decided it's looting time. We want to be rich, obscenely rich like white people. That's quotation verbatim. Okay, so for me, I'm saying, the Soweto kids that we need to talk today, who did they die for? And the way they killed Stephen Biko, this book will tell you, the way they killed him. What does he die for? Why do our people die for? if the lip service people, the catechism of feudal people and false black nationalists and the pitfalls of nationalism of Fanon is forgotten, is no more studied, where do we go? So for me, in South Africa, I went to advise filmmaking many times, but 17 times I remember. Minister of this. First, they didn't know where cinema belonged. Like Kenya, like other African countries, this so-called Marxists did not know where cinema should go. Is it a sport? Cuba was saying it's a warfare. They created documentary unit and dramatic unit to say we should be on both fronts because cinema is the power that goes in the head of people. How did Hollywood harvest all these black people all over the world? Through Hollywood that came in the at the foot of the Second World War. That make American empire big was Hollywood. This is not studied because political science doesn't go there. It doesn't go to real cultural discourse. It goes into political catechism. For me, I study visual grammar, the vocabulary of thought system that has kept us shackled to this day. And I always want to make a film that goes in our brain to fight hand-to-hand combat with the way we think. In our choice of partners and lovers, it manifests. Okay, so South Africa said to me, come and help us a filmmaking of they call it non-racial film or colorless film. And I said, first, when I met them in a conference, ANC called in London, I said, there's no such a film. Black people are now going to unleash black stories like hell. You cannot tell them they have to include white people in their story suddenly when their turn comes. Those white people were the apartheid film storytellers, never had black people except as servants. Why is ANC pushing that? They call me names publicly in newspaper. If he's talking stuff like this, why is he living in America? Because I said to one of the ANC person in Joburg at the Apartheid Museum, I said, because I don't want to be oppressed by people like you in my own country. You little people are everywhere. She was shocked. She didn't know what hit her. I said, that's why. This is in public. Workers were invited to hear us. And she said, "What? If you talk this much, what are you doing in America?" I said to her, I'm hiding for people like you. They're also in my country. For me, seriously, it's very emotional. Black people cannot be history makers under these false prophets and false leaders. We, as Sister Hill said, we have celebrities. We don't touch them. We don't critically analyze them, and they ravage a continent and go, and we're left with the refugee of that. So to me, I think when South Africa started going about, colorless society, posters. Big posters in South Africa has to have a black person and a white person. If not, there's the whole two bodies. They say, what's the meaning of this? False. No, whites were not ready. Blacks were not ready for that kind of false idea of romantic, colorless planet. And we're reaping the benefit now. Where else, let me tell you, my friends, where else in Africa? If you remember, South African immigrants, exiles were in Tanzania, Ethiopia, Mandela himself in Ethiopia. Can you imagine if we went around and killed them? And can I accept now what they do to other Africans? Just the other day, they killed a black guy who's a South African thinking he's African. That's how backward they are in South Africa. There's a filmmaker called Zora Maseko, dark-skinned brother. His father was an ambassador in Chile. They tried to kill him thinking he was from another African country. This started 15, 20 years ago. And South Africa has been hiding it from the time of Mbeki. They've been hiding what they're doing to Mozambican immigrants, Angolan immigrants, immigrants from other African countries, Nigeria, Ethiopia. I know this personal story that I'm telling you because I know filmmakers who wanted to do a movie on it. South African filmmakers were not allowed by the ANC bureaucracy. So I hope I didn't confuse you because the spirit of the discussion is very important to me. To get Sister Hill here, the brother, I really don't know him. I'm very happy of the way he's looking because I thought we're going to go head on because to me, the defensive mindset in South Africa by former ANC people you knew you were marching with, you did fundraising with, telling you now it's reality. And then saying to me, you know, we can help other poor African countries because we're the richest African countries. I say, don't do me a favor. Just pay your mortgage you didn't pay in Ghana for Nkrumah's effort to free South Africa. So basically, thank you for giving me. I'm very emotional because to me, in here, you will see all the agents together. Soweto trembled them. Mossad, CIA, MAI, the British CIA, CIA America, they were scared. Now they said they get together and say, now we got to talk to Mandela. Even the first few times when Mandela is out from the prison, okay, they were surrounding him to see and measure his head. They brought a psychiatrist to read his brain. They take him, drive him around so he gets used to the traffic, etc. Because they had him for 27 years. I have a problem criticizing Mandela. I'm not happy with the way it concluded. I'm not happy. But I felt I've never been one day in prison. So how can I dare question a brother who has been 27 years in prison? But I see the game they played on us, the rest of us who see things the other way. The other thing I want to say, if you permit me, I gave film class in Robben Island for 2 weeks. You sleep there for 1 week, your eardrum, the ocean itself destroys you. And I was wondering, how can this brother's in prison 27 years, the water just drowns you. By the time you're like out, you are completely ruined psychologically. It's intentional that the prison is there. But there was a brother called Subueko, the PAC guy. Yeah. The ANC guy, the ones who are not part of the power, who are not like they're outside, some of them just disillusioned drinking. They were telling me, when Mandela and his group will come from the corral where they make them crack stone for all day, when they passed by, the brother was kept alone in one house. Their move, the South Africa's move and the CIA moves against black consciousness is amazing. It goes back. And they isolated him by himself in a house. When Mandela and all of them are passing by, he will just say to the Mandela group, he'll grab the soil and he'll just pour the soil down. So this one of the prisoners, I said, what was he saying? He says, don't sell my land. Don't sell my homeland. They say that's what he was saying. So to me, that attack from what the brother is saying here, on the black consciousness movement, and the violence that happened to Stephen Biko and all the other folks in that area to neutralize them, to scandalize them, was a serious take on Pan-Africanism in South Africa. Thank you so much. I took too long.
Just add one little thing.
Go ahead, sister.
Mandela did not operate alone, having traveled with him for a number of days.
Yes, ma'am.
There are other factors that influence people, and this is what I want you to just have some empathy. Here's a person who's been in for 27 years. Here are people around him, ANC, who are telling him the strategy. I don't know, because I didn't talk to him about it, but I did see. The only thing I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that let us be cautious about assigning people sole power in these kinds of situations. There are a couple of things that can make you doubt your agenda. One is you've been in prison for 27 years. You know, with disinformation and little information, so forth. And the other is, if you disagree with the people, where do you go? Who are telling you what you should do? So it's just a very complex situation. That's all I'm saying to people. I'm not saying that, and we should have expected that there would be an attempt to use him, right, to defeat the revolution, to change. And they use other people who are in your network. They used all kinds of things. They used scandal, you know. So, and I'm just saying that you're not a sole actor that's just totally.
I agree with you. That's why, to me, I don't go to Mandela. I don't, because
Right.
to me, his sacrifice is what holds me. Otherwise, I have, you know, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, as a cultural person, I have many problems in the way things unfolded.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I also want to bring and add another one, since I talked about a few other people. Winnie Mandela is also the first person to be demonized. To be demonized. I was on the plane coming back from Ethiopia having shot a film, and a white South African woman was on this Ethiopian Airlines, and she said to this American crew I had, she said to them, "I'm leaving South Africa." That's immediately as Mandela is coming out, things are, you know, and they asked her why. She said, "Winnie Mandela is going to be the new president. She's a fascist. I'm leaving the country." Okay, so to me, Winnie's demonization, not only by white people, by African people,
Oh, yeah.
by political organizations, is also a serious crime made. You know, I'm not trying to make you feel important. I am. I was in her house one time. I showed a film. I was invited. I was in her house. I walked in. If, you know, to me, if Sharik divorced me, there's not going to be a picture in the house. I'm an Ethiopian. There's no way there's going to be her picture in the house. I'll go around and burn it all down. I go to Winnie's house. Okay. The first picture I see is Mandela. He has divorced her. He's married another woman. She has, and I said, "Damn, sister, what kind of strength is it?" Because I cannot do that. Okay? The other picture next in the middle as a shrine she had for was Chris Honig.
Yeah.
And I said, why Chris Honig is in the temple, in a shrine? Because I understood why he was killed then, right there, looking at the picture. Okay? And so, let me tell you, there were a lot of young people in South Africa who were fired up. As we were going to our house, there was a guy, South African OG like me, in the car. And he was saying how the young people were saying, "Why do we have an American guy running the South African Airlines now in the new South Africa?" In the car, there's a big van. They're arguing. And I'm from Ethiopia. And I'm listening. Why don't they bring the old guy like me said, "Well, we don't have real, skilled people. We just got freedom." And they said, "Why don't we bring Ethiopian Airlines, which is known all over the world, a guy who ran that place or a woman who ran that place?" This is how we go into her place, this argument going on. Young people come in and said to her, apparently, if you remember, at one point, Mbeki has brushed her aside in a big stadium. And I'm sitting in the room. Muta Baruka from Sankova Shango was there. All these young people are talking to her. They love her like hell. And she said, they ask her, why did you do, is it true you do this, you did this? They're talking, she's saying nothing. And then she said, for the first time, turns towards me, she said, what's the Ethiopian guy thinks? And then I said, for Mbeki kind of politician, I said to her, to openly push you aside, you must have done to him something under the table, I said to her. And she said, that's the brother I want my film to be made by. Because I said, there's no way this British skilled Mbeki, brilliant brother, he's really brilliant in the South African intellectual landscape. There's no way he would do openly in public, push her like that, knowing she is loved by many young people. But I said to her, you did something to him under the table, so you're not an angel, is what I was saying. And she said, I want my film to be made by this guy. So to me, Winnie is the reason I know Mandela. I'm at UCLA, don't know nothing about Africa, don't care. I'm more preoccupied about something, the Panther, Black Power stuff. Suddenly I see her in a movie, and I said, whoa. And then that's when I knew his name, Mandela, her Mandela name, and I said, damn. So Mandela is known world over by her. I will contend this discussion.
But she
Her.
kept him alive.
Huh?
She kept him alive. In our memory when he was the 27
In global
years.
memory.
Yeah, global.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. How
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And so thank you for disrupting you guys.
No. All right, y'all. Thank you, Haile. We're gonna wrap this up. What a wonderful, Dr. Hill, thank you.
Thank you.
Baba Twiggs, thank you. Yes. Baba Twiggs, well, you brother, you had way around the world. Do you mind giving us a final word that you've heard all of this?
No, I think we had a nice and robust discussion and different perspective, and of course also Dr. Sylvia Hill going into detail from a theoretical perspective. The reality is the struggle is not over. We have a long way to go. And I think the main thing that we need to do, and I started with that we need to reach out to one another. The bonds, the links of solidarity that we had, we need to rebuild them and engage in this kind of robust discussion with one another. Because this struggle is, for as long as been in the US, a lot of activists and people will say that this is not necessarily your struggle, this is our struggle. It continues to be your struggle. So let's reach out, work together, and continue this. We need to find bonds, we need to find alliances, but to prepare for a different phase of struggle. We need to be able to get this properly, totally, truly liberated country of ours. The last colony of the continent, one of the last, of course. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me, by the way, and greetings to everyone.
Thank you, Baba Twiggs. We appreciate you. Mama Silver, before you close out, because you're here with us, the title of the book that Haile had held up was James Sanders' book, Apartheid's Friends. So if you want to get that book, Apartheid's Friends, that's for the folks who are maybe viewing later. Mama Silver, close us out, please, if you don't mind.
I thought, Brother did.
Yeah, but you here, you got to give us a let. We let the sister we balance it out.
I just want to say this has been very inspiring and very engaging to hear from you all and see your interest, and particularly to hear from Twiggs. And we thank you as well. And I think that, our luta continua, really. The struggle does continue. And, Jesse used to say, keep hope alive, and it always sounded, but it's true. Keep hope alive, because we do have to, and the final point that Twiggs made about solidarity is really key. We have to have people-to-people ties. One of the sad parts for me with the anti-apartheid struggle was when the ANC assumed state power.
they did not feel a need to include solidarity as part of their agenda. I mean, they had an embassy, but it was more formalized in terms of dealing with the State Department and so forth, the people of recognition. And different ambassadors had different strategies. Some were more people-oriented, and you all might have gone to different events there, and some were not. But it was just very clear that one of the lessons that we learned is that in order to influence U.S. foreign policy, you have to have ties to the solidarity groups, because that's what's going to keep your hope alive there. And I will say this, I just want to call it, there was an ambassador, he was the chargé d'affaires from Botswana, who's, my 85-year-old member, can't remember his name right now, but I will say this, he went to Congress every session, right? And particularly those sessions related. He asked questions of people who were involved with the issues of organizing. And, he worked. He worked. He was just, we always say it, he was the best example of a chargé d'affaires, other than Tanzania during the time of, Ambassador Bomani and Hamza Aziz, who was his chargé d'affaires. They were very, very serious about their work. And, President Nyerere did have a view about the role of African Americans, the role of the public. And in 1978, the ambassador asked us to collaborate with Howard to organize a speech that Nyerere wanted to present. And it was entitled The Haves and Have-Nots. And Crampton Auditorium hosts 1,500 people. The line was down to Georgia Avenue. And we had to open the theater as an alternative seating, but we just could not seat everybody that came. It was just a very important demonstration of solidarity. And as I said, we didn't have internet or anything. We sent out invitations, but I remember we sent out 5,000 invitations, trying to get 1,500 people, and I swear 5,000 people showed up. They came from Chicago, they came from all over. But again, if you're going to use the instruments of your administrative structure, you can use them too to create venues where there's solidarity of people getting together and feeling some connection. That's important. No matter how much is illogical to us, you have to create the experiences that reinforce the logic in the minds of people who are not reading and studying this every day. They're trying to hammer their lives out the best that they could. But just like they attend to other things, they'll attend to this too.
Those are words of true wisdom. It's a sebait, as the ancient Egyptians would say, a real teaching. Brother Weezer, thank you, man, for putting this together. You want to say anything before Weezer's okay. So thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right, y'all, we're going to ease on out for the evening. And we'll pick up here at this space. That's a good question. Let's get him. He means he can get it. Thank you, Baba Twiggs.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, brother.
Bye.
Good night. Or good morning.
Goodbye, y'all.
Thank you.